This adorable little vanity chair I got at a thrift store, I think. No, I think I got it at Salvation Army at the auction. It's been in my daughter's room. She sits at it every day to put her makeup on at her vanity, and it was dirty when I got it, but now it's really, really filthy. So a gal that goes to my church came to me after church and said, oh, I have this curtain panel for you that I'm not going to use, and it's a pretty rose-colored velvet. And so when she gave it to me, I was like, oh, that'll be perfect for that vanity chair, because my daughter wants to paint her room in a sagey green color and just do a color drench in the whole room, ceiling, walls, molding, closet doors, everything. With that, I figured that this rose-colored fabric on this chair will be perfect. Let's do this. I am gonna make this skirt just slightly shorter, maybe an inch shorter. Ooh, wowza. What? Need my trash can for those babies. Don't want that to end up on the floor. So I took the cambric off, and there's this jute webbing, and there's cambric here too. So what it looks like is the springs probably came out the bottom, and so somebody just put put jute webbing right over the cambric. So I sat down in it to test it and see how it felt, debating on whether or not I should take it all the way down to the bare bones. And it turns out that this leg is loose, and so I've got to take it all the way down so I can remedy this leg situation here. I'm going to take all this off, and I might have to tie some springs, so we'll see. I'll tell you what, vintage pieces of furniture I think are definitely harder to work on than a newer piece that's just needing a facelift. Older pieces, you tend to have to do more remedying of the frames, the legs, the springs. There's generally more work involved in a vintage piece. A lot of times the frame can be really, really worn out when you get down to where you have to staple. Sometimes the wood is like Swiss cheese. It's difficult to find a place to staple because the wood's really worn out. So if you're a beginner and you have a choice, I would maybe start with a piece that's not vintage. I will say it is very satisfying to do a vintage piece because the vintage furniture is just so beautiful. So I've got the chair re-wrapped with new Dacron, and I stuffed some foam filling in here on the front to puff that up and make that this front roll so apparent. So now I'm gonna go ahead and just measure my pieces so I can cut my fabric. I did not keep the pieces so I could use them as a pattern because I ripped them up too much. I'm gonna start with the inside back, and we're gonna need to come around, show you the back. So I'm bringing my tape measure through the back. We're going to fasten it right here on this piece of wood, and then over the top and back here. So I need 20 inches by 23 inches. So actually my width goes first. So 23 wide by 20 this way. All right, and then the seat. So now I can go ahead and cut those 3 pieces. I'll go ahead and cut the piece for my ruffled skirt, and I'll cut my welt and make my welt. I'm going to take the drapery lining off. Ooh, it's even weighted. Where did these come from? I'll take the weights out of the corners. They're not well made, but there are weights, and it does have good lining. I'll keep the lining, I'll keep the drapery weights. So this is velvet. So the one thing that you want to remember for sure when you're using this, I'm not going to take out this, I'm just going to cut this off because velvet will show that stitch line in it forever, so I won't be able to use that fabric. You want to make sure that you run your nap on your velvet all the same direction on your piece of furniture. So you see how it changes the look. So you want to make sure that all your velvet is run in the same direction. And I'm going to mark these with arrows. So this is the front, and this is the seat, and this is the front, And this is the inside back. All right, now I need the outside back, some welt, and then the skirt. I have a whole separate video for making welt, and I'll link to that in the cards here. Okay, so now it's time to make the skirt, the ruffled skirt. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna self-line my skirt, which means rather than having a hem at the bottom, I'm just gonna cut my fabric to be twice this length, fold it up, and sew both raw edges against my welt. Let me see, what do I have here? And I want my skirt to be slightly shorter than this because I thought this looked a little bit too long for my taste. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I will cut 12 inches because that skirt is 6 inches and I want it to be slightly shorter, so that will account for my seams and all. Okay, so 12 inches. Right here. Okay, so I'm gonna have to cut one more 12 inch, but a self-lined skirt means I will fold this like so, and then I'll sew the welt on up here, and I'll have a self-lined skirt. So there'll be no hem in the bottom. Okay, so I'm making the ruffle. I made my welt already, and I have a separate video for that. And I made my ruffle, and I did this, I usually will use my tension to create the ruffle, but this time what I did is I zigzag stitched over the top of the thread, and I do have a video about this. Now what I'm doing is I'm joining together my welt and my ruffle, lining up this edge with this edge of my welt, and then I've got my zipper foot on. Keep all my broken needles inside of this Tic Tac case so that they're not in a garbage bag and poking someone, and then I'll just throw this whole thing away in a bit. So it's all sewn on, and now this will go like that. So cute. Here is the skirt that I just sewed onto the welt, and this is the way I like to do this, and that is I sewed it on into a loop. Basically, I joined together the welt and the skirt here, and this will go in the front because the chair will be tucked into her vanity, so the back is going to be where it's most exposed. Alright, so I clearly cut these way bigger than I needed to. Okay, relief cuts. So I tucked fabric through to the back, and there's this wooden bar here, which is, you know, this piece here. So we need to get around that. So we need to make relief cuts here. So got my good scissors, and I'm going to cut straight back to that bar. A little bit more. Now I can push through this piece here and pull that down. This will go around like so. Same thing on the other side. Fold it back out. So you just feel for that bar, and you're going to cut your relief cut almost to it. And then if you need to go a little bit more or do your little bit of crow's foot to get around, I'll show you what I mean. So I cut straight back towards that piece of wood that goes right there, and then I did a little bit of a crow's foot cut there like that in order to be able, so that it'll open up around that piece of wood like that. I'm going to put my first staple in, and I'm going to do it as a temporary staple. Put one in front. One on each side. So we're making our way to this corner. So I brought this fabric tight around the front and put a staple here. I might need to put another one, but let's see if I can get this to tuck and fold neatly. All right, I'm gonna have to take off some of this fabric. I just cut out a little triangle of fabric here so we have less bulk in this fold. And I'm gonna have to put another staple, bringing this fabric down nice and tight, and then I'm gonna have to put another staple here. Now I can now, and keep in mind there's going to be a skirt on here. Okay, inside back. All the same direction. I'm going to put a staple in this top center, bottom center, and then we'll... Alright, let's go ahead and make these relief cuts so that we can get this to pull around. In the back, so this inside back, you don't bring it up and staple it here because then there would be this space and you would see light through there. So you have to bring it down and staple it down here. Let's see if that... Yep. I probably should have... Maybe I'll stuff some Dacron in there to puff that up a little bit. So I'm just adding some Dacron to this part here in order to fill that in a little bit so there's not a gap between the inside back and the seat. Much better. Now I can pull this and tighten it. It'll be nice and smooth. All right, and now this back part will pull down and out. What I'm doing here is I'm sort of easing this around by pulling the fabric up in order to kind of bring the gathers around. I don't know how else to say it. I'm easing it. And then there's going to be welt here. So this bit of gathering here, you won't see it. I'll have to take that staple out, my initial staple. Okay, time for welt. Now I'll have to go around this with tack strip so that this will stay put. I think I'm going to use ply grip on here. Okay, I'm going to use ply grip, but I'm still going to have to put tack strip on here to hold this. All right, let me show you what tack strip does here close up. So here's the welt. Okay, so there's tack strip here, and you can see that this just stays nice and tight against the chair, where up here there's no tack strip. You see how this just, I could potentially put staples real close, but then you might see them when you go to attach. So it just doesn't, you have to use tack strip to hold the welt nice and tight to the chair. So now I'm going to add a piece of scrap fabric to this, give some structure here. Now ply grip and then Dacron. So we'll put ply grip on here now. I just keep mine stored in the box, and let's see. I keep it under my cutting table. Once you get to know your stapler, you can get this one leg of your staple right in that hole is the best, I've found is the best way to do this. Once all the ply grip is on here and stapled, then you want to close it down like 3/4 of the way. So there's like, they're closed like 3/4. The other thing about laying your chair like this is the top of the velvet gets dented by the wood. Velvet is really, really finicky and sometimes can get dented and creased, and you can't get those dents or creases out. I have a whole video on the nature of velvet. So if you want to see that video on how to use velvet and things to be aware of when you're using velvet, I have a whole video on that. If you are interested in learning upholstery with a full-on course, I do have a basic upholstery class that talks about choosing the right chair for your first upholstery project. You can look up that video right here. I'll put that video here and you can take a look at that if you're interested in learning to do upholstery. It's just a basic chair, the easiest style of chair to do. I talk in that video about how to choose the right chair for your first project so that you're not overwhelmed and you can actually finish your first upholstery project. Now we can apply the Dacron, and ideally you want the Dacron to come to the edge of this ply grip. And when you're cutting your Dacron, use your junk scissors because this Dacron really will dull your scissors quickly. So I'll probably have to trim that down a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and put a staple in it just to keep it in place. Now we're right. Perfect. Okay, now we can start closing the back. I'm going to put a piece here to hold this, put a staple there to hold this, and then we can, this is where a regulator comes in real handy, is to tuck into ply grip. I'm going to trim this off a little bit more here. I'm going to trim this at kind of an angle too. So I'm going to kind of bevel this edge of my Dacron so it's not as thick. Because one thing is you want your Dacron to come to the edge of your ply grip, but you don't want it to fold over into your ply grip. So that's why this little beveled edge if you bevel your Dacron. Okay, my fabric is a little bit too long here. I'm gonna trim this a bit, because if your fabric is too long, then you're gonna have a hard time getting those ends to tuck in and they might peek out. Just push your fabric to the edge and tuck it in. See, there, it's a little long, and as you're tucking, you can kind of push it down. Pull your fabric tight. Grab my mallet, bang this, and then we should be able to pull tight across the other side. And listen, you have to use a rubber mallet. Don't try to use a hammer or your tack hammer, because that tack strip is sharp and it can actually make a hole in your fabric. Ask me how I know. So now that that's nice and tight, we'll come over here, and now we can pull this into the tack strip. Let me cut some skirt time. Okay, this is the part where I joined the welt, so I'm gonna put this in the front. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I need to measure this and mark a line. I'm gonna sharpen some chalk. So with the pointed chalk, I am going to draw a straight line, and I'm going 1 inch from the bottom edge of the chair. There we go. I'm gonna line up my welt with this. And I'm putting my staple in right underneath, all right, my welt cord. Stapled into the welt cord. Oh, looks good. And that's all she wrote. I've got her all complete. I steamed the skirt so that it would hang down a little bit neater and flatter. It still sticks out a little bit, but that'll come down over time. But there she is, all complete and looking so cute. I just love it and can't wait to see it in the room. I'll have to show it to you in the room once I get the room all redone. So if you're thinking of embarking on upholstery and you're not sure exactly where to start or what type of furniture would be ideal place to start your upholstery journey, click on this video right here. Where do I start? I'll walk you right through it.